Anna had always prided herself on her rational mind. As a successful psychotherapist, she helped people deal with their fears and anxieties. But a new patient named Max turned her world upside down. Max came to her with an unusual complaint. He claimed to hear silence, not just the absence of sound, but a living, pulsating silence that seemed to be watching him. Anna was skeptical, assuming it was probably a manifestation of an anxiety disorder or the early stages of schizophrenia. However, as the sessions continued, Anna began to notice oddities. Every time Max talked about the watching silence, the office seemed to get colder. Sounds from outside would fade away as if the room was being separated from the rest of the world by an invisible barrier. Anna tried to rationalize what was happening, attributing everything to coincidences and imagination. But then the nightmares began. Every night she found herself in endless darkness, where the only sound was her own breathing, and the louder she tried to scream, the denser the silence around her became. After a particularly difficult night, Anna decided to delve into Max's history. She discovered that 5 years ago, he had been the sole survivor of a terrible accident in which his entire family had died. Rescuers found him in a mangled car, trapped between the bodies of his parents and sister. He had spent almost a day in this nightmare before being discovered. Anna realized that Max's watching silence was a traumatic memory that had taken on a life of its own. But the more she tried to help him, the more this silence seeped into her own life. She began to notice moments of absolute silence in the most unexpected places, in a noisy supermarket, on a busy street, in her own living room. In these moments, the world seemed to freeze, and Anna felt someone's intense gaze upon her. Colleagues began to notice changes in her behavior. Anna looked exhausted, constantly looking over her shoulder and flinching at the slightest noise. She began to avoid communication, spending more and more time in the silence of her office. One day, during a session with Max, something inexplicable happened. When he once again spoke about the watching silence, all sounds disappeared, completely. Anna couldn't even hear her own heartbeat. At that moment, she saw it, a shadow swirling in the corner of the office, not cast by any object, and this shadow seemed to be looking directly at her. Anna blinked, and everything returned to normal. Max continued talking, not noticing anything unusual, but she knew that what she had seen was real. From that day on, Anna's life turned into a nightmare. Silence pursued her everywhere, becoming more and more tangible. She felt its presence even in the noisiest places. The shadows in the corners of her house seemed to lengthen and move when she wasn't looking at them directly. Anna began to research the phenomenon of watching silence, delving into occult texts and little-known psychological theories. She found mentions of ancient entities that fed on human fears and traumas. Some sources called them noise eaters, creatures that filled the voids of silence to penetrate our world. She realized that in trying to help Max, she had inadvertently opened a door for this entity. Now she was connected to it, and every moment of silence became a potential threat. Anna tried to fill her life with sounds. She turned on music and television, not turning them off even at night. But more and more often, electronics would fail for no apparent reason, plunging her home into an ominous silence. In desperation, she turned to Max, hoping to find answers. But she discovered that he had vanished without a trace. His apartment stood empty, as if no one had ever lived there. All records of him had mysteriously disappeared from her archives. Anna's colleagues raised the alarm when she stopped showing up for work. The police, called to check, found her apartment in perfect order, but without any sign of the owner's presence. The only clue was an inscription on the bathroom mirror, made with lipstick: "Silence is watching." The investigation yielded no results. Anna seemed to have dissolved into thin air. Her disappearance became the subject of heated discussions in psychological circles and a topic for urban legends. Years later, one of Anna's patients, who had undergone treatment shortly before her disappearance, turned to a new therapist with an unusual complaint. She claimed that sometimes she heard her former doctors whisper in moments of absolute silence, a whisper warning about something watching from the void. They say if you listen to the silence carefully enough, you can hear the echo of other people's fears and the screams of those who were absorbed by it. And somewhere out there, in this endless emptiness, Anna is still trying to warn us about the danger lurking in the very heart of silence. But are we ready to hear her voice? And will this attempt become our own ticket to the realm of eternal, watching silence?